Hey guys, I want to make a video today and talk to you a little bit about WoW raiding. I recently did Sepulchre, the first ones, and the video came out. There's been a lot of discussion about it. People have not been happy. And some people, actually I think most people agree, but I want to talk a little bit about my experiences with it, my thoughts on the raid, and what I really want to talk about a lot in this video is my thoughts on group content in general, and just kind of how my feelings and thoughts towards it have shifted over the years, and why I think that is. So before I do that, I want to say, obviously, I did not stream today. Why did I not stream today? Um, I've been playing a game of hide and seek with the Austin Police Department for the past 2 years. I've been winning until last night. They got me. So I've got to do some stuff for my car that I should have done a long time ago, and I need to install some new lights on it and just other stuff that have just been fucked up. And that's why I have to do that. And there's also some pressing business stuff that I have to deal with as well. So I just wanted to address that real quick for anybody who was wondering. So besides that, I want to talk a little bit about the WoW raid. Now, yesterday, Sepulchre, the first ones, the final raid in Shadowlands came out. I went in there with a stream pug. I think the people there were all around like 245 to 255 item level, probably closer to 245 than 255 on average. And we went in and we had a pretty bad time. We had relatively no preparation. We had no communication really. And it was just a huge headache with a lot of mechanics in there that really did require a lot of coordination and communication. In my opinion, like this was not obviously the best and most effective way to deal with the raid and to do the raid. And I feel like, holy fuck, how are they so loud? Jesus Christ. The birds are crazy. And so anyway, I've been doing a raid. Thank you. I've been doing the raids like this ever since Legion, ever since War Road to Draenor, really. As you know, I get everybody together on the first day of the raid. We all go in with a stream pug with people that are pretty well geared. And to be honest, in Nighthold and Emerald Nightmare especially, Tumor Sargeras and Taurus, I mean, Old Deer, Battle of Zarwar, I mean, I think we skipped Nilotha because I wasn't streaming, and almost Castle Nathria, right? I feel like just over the course of time, the raids have just gotten a lot harder. And I think this is not something that's necessarily for the betterment of the average player in WoW. And I think what's kind of happened over the years is that the raids have become more and more complex, and they've become more and more oppressive towards mistakes. They have been, you see now one-shot mechanics happening in even normal mode, and things that maybe not functionally a one-shot. Well, they are functionally a one-shot, but they are not technically a one-shot. They just do a huge amount of damage. And so these types of things I feel are, the truth is that my experience yesterday doing the raid is, in my opinion, probably the average player experience. And I can say that for a lot of people, I would assume that the way that they go through the raid is just probably not very enjoyable. And I think this is something that's artificially increased by Blizzard's arms race with add-on developers. And I think this has happened ever since probably Mists of Pandaria, and it's gotten a lot worse ever since Legion, because now you see the prevalence of weak auras, the amount of like depth and add-ons that players have now. And an average player is not going to really have, maybe they have DBM, but they don't have weak auras that give them extra levels of insight and awareness on fights that, they might not necessarily have access to. So what ends up happening is that you have players that are all operating on different levels of awareness, and Blizzard is designing the game for the highest level of awareness. And while I know that you can probably do most of the fights without DBM and without weak auras, because that's generally what I do, I think that it just substantially makes things easier, and if it didn't, then you wouldn't see every top-end player using them. So what I think is happening is that average players and hardcore players, the skill gap between them is getting larger and larger and larger over time, because not only are hardcore players just getting better and better and better at the game, but on top of that, they are becoming artificially better by having access to better add-ons and having access to better weak auras that artificially increase their awareness in the game in a way that a new player might not be aware of. So, like, not only do they not really know what's going on in the fight, but they also don't have add-ons to tell them what's going on in the fight. So I think, like, for example, I'll use one example here, is that in in tier 11, this is the first tier of Cataclysm, you saw a lot of people for the first time quit the game. And I think a big reason for that is that the tier 11 raid content was just, let's be honest, astronomically harder than ICC. I mean, if you go back and you look at the amount of mechanics you needed to do for like Heroic Cho'Gall or for Omnitron Defense System, and you compare that to the Lich King, or you compare that to even more mechanically intensive fight, something like Professor Putricide, even then you see such a vast difference between the amount of mechanics and the amount of expectations that's placed, not only on the raid as a whole, but on individual players to be aware of so many things and the reaction time that requires. And I think that this has been something that's been pushed by a lot of high-end players over the years. And I feel like over time, like I've kind of learned the error of my ways, but I think, especially early on, it's something that I unfortunately promoted as well. I think what's happened a lot is that you have the game becoming increasingly designed for the bottom and top 10% of players. You see the game that is designed to have a no-lose mode like LFR, and then you have the game that's designed to have like 15 different nerfs until it's really in its final state in Mythic. I think that these extremes are not necessarily catering to that middle 80% of players that just want to play a fun game that's easy to understand, that is just not overly punishing, it is not overly stressful. And I feel like a lot of the raids that happen now, there are a lot of things that you're seeing, one-shot mechanics in normal mode even on some of the earlier bosses. These are not things that we used to see back in Legion and BFA. And I think that you can easily say that, well, like get good, like this is just how it is now. But I don't think that this is necessarily an improvement. I think that, again, this is something that is an escalation between developers of add-ons and the highest 1% of players, and also Blizzard, where Blizzard continues to try to challenge those players, and those players continue to overcome those challenges through skill-based and also artificial means like add-ons. And the process of that and the outcome of that is that many other players that are just somewhere in the middle that just want to raid for fun or whatever end up getting left out. And I feel like a lot of those people, they go into a raid that is very hard to do without a lot of communication and coordination, etc. And I don't think communication and coordination is necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like the amount of things you need to be aware of and the amount of things you need to do are increasing a lot, especially if you compare it again to something like Warlords of Draenor or something a little bit more recent like Legion. And I feel like this has been a ongoing trend now for years, and I think that you can see the amount of completion rates for each different raid tier going down every single time as evidence for the fact that they have become increasingly less approachable. Let's say that, less approachable. And I also think that this is a problem because I'm going to be honest, guys, like this is that's what I think about WoW raids. I think that WoW raids have just gotten like too hard for an average player, and I think it's just too much. And again, like I can do it, it's fine. Like I've done all of the fights pretty much on Mythic up until BFA really. And so it's not like I can't do this stuff, it's more that I don't really want to. And I think that's another real problem that the game has had, is that I don't really know how much of this is like me personally, and how much of this is just the game not inspiring me. But I don't really care about getting the new gear or anything like that in the game, because I just know that it'll get replaced by something that I loot out in the open world next patch. Or next expansion, I think is fair. But many times next patch will completely invalidate efforts I had made in the previous patch, and I never really feel like I have any sort of permanence for my gains that I have that I used to maybe feel back in Burning Crusade or Classic, for example. And even if you contrast that with Lost Ark, whenever I make progress in Lost Ark with, let's say, my cards, or let's say, I don't know, Mokoko seeds or some other bullshit, right? There's always like an overarching goal that you're working towards that will not be invalidated whenever the next content patch comes out. And I think that goal to work towards and not having to worry about that gives me a lot more motivation to continue playing and to continue working towards those goals, because I know that those goals are not building a castle on sand. And I feel like that's the way that I felt about WoW raiding. And I think that a lot of this has also been a personal paradigm shift for me. And I've realized this with raiding in multiple games. I remember I was raiding with Cody, and we were doing Ifrit, minimum item level, no echo, and I was doing it with him. And we had like healers that were standing in like the red circles, and like, you know, like Ifrit does like a hateful attack towards like a ranged player or like a healer or something like that, and you have to like move out. And you have people that were not moving out, and they just kept doing it wrong, getting hit by the charges. And like I was doing this for an hour, and like after about 3 pulls, I wasn't having fun anymore. I think that for me, like I've lost a lot of my personal, on a personal level, I've lost a lot of my patience for a lot of like competitive and like hard group content. I feel like it's always been, truth is, I never really liked raiding. I've only liked the gear that I get from raiding. And I think that's very, very strongly evidenced by the fact that whenever I raided back in Siege of Orgrimmar and Dragon Soul, the day that I got my last piece of gear was the last day they saw me. I was done. I was that guy, and I don't raid anymore because I know it's a toxic attitude to have, and I don't want to, I know that about myself, and so I don't want to be that guy. So because of that, I don't really like raiding. I don't like doing group content. I don't like feeling like I'm being held back by other people. The people are not making mistakes or not learning or picking up on things that I feel like they should be. And I also don't want this to seem like I'm somehow some patron saint that never makes mistakes. I'm sometimes the person who's holding people back. I'm sometimes the person who is doing low damage. I'm the person who can't figure out a mechanic. I'm the person who's the problem. And I feel like it's just, my patience for those kinds of things over the years has just really gotten to pretty much zero. And it doesn't really matter if I'm doing Savage or minimum item level no echo in Final Fantasy, whether I'm doing something in Lost Ark, whether I'm doing something in World of Warcraft. The overall feeling that I have is that I don't want to waste my time because somebody else can't figure something out. And it's weird for me to think about this because as somebody who's raided in WoW for many years and enjoyed it to a certain degree, or at least, as I said before, enjoyed the gear, and I just did it for so long. How could this really happen? I think that some of the reasons why it's happened is that, especially like raiding on stream, and there's always like in my mind, my dad is like very much into like economics, and he's executive at a company, and so like growing up, he taught me a lot of these ideas, right? Opportunity cost. And so I'm thinking opportunity cost in my head, man, I could be farming mounts right now, but instead of that, I'm sitting here wiping because, Billy can't figure out left from right. And it's just, I'm sorry, but I'm just really not having a good time. And it just frustrates me. And I feel like I'm just so particular about how I want to play and who I want to play with that whenever I go into like a pug or something like that, and it doesn't work out, I just get so frustrated and pissed off, and it's just a bad experience for everyone. And so I think it's probably a little bit my fault for that, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's my responsibility to have a good experience in the game to a certain degree, and whenever you set yourselves up for failure and you fail, maybe that's not necessarily somebody else's fault. Maybe it is my fault. I think that for me, whenever I go through and I do a raid like Sepulchre or something like that, some people ask me, they're like, well, why did you think you could do it whenever, you just invited a bunch of random people from the stream and, nobody knew what was going on? And it's very simple. It's because it's worked. It's worked. It worked in Legion. It worked in WoD. It worked in BFA. It's worked every time pretty much. And so, yeah, of course I thought we could do it because we've done it before. And that's what I've said before, is that the raids have gotten harder. And I think that this is also not the raid getting harder itself. It's also the fact that Alliance has gotten deader. And I remember I went and I made a group just on Horde to see how many people would theoretically join if I went to make a group on Horde. And I had about, 250 people that queued up like within 2 or 3 minutes of me making the group. And then I'm back on Alliance and we're struggling just to find one healer. So it's just such a artificially bad experience, and I can't wait for 9.25 to come out so I won't have to deal with it anymore. But it's like, not only is the raid harder, not only are we not as prepared as maybe we used to be, right? We probably were a little bit more prepared back then, but not only are we not as geared, but on top of that, like all the good people that were in the raid that used to fucking carry the damage, they're gone. They're on Horde now because they're the ones that care about their character, and so they're fucking gone. And so it's just insult to injury, insult to injury, insult to injury, and you just end up having a really bad experience. And it's like, I don't want to swap. I'm telling you guys right now, I'm not going to swap to Horde. Fuck that. I'm not swapping to Horde. Like I'm not. I'd rather, to be honest with you, I would rather quit the game. And it's not because I hate the Horde. My first character was Horde. It's like a fucking personal thing. Like, if I have to pay you $25 because you can't balance your game, I'm fucking done. And I think another big factor with this is the fact that, like, whenever I play on Lost Ark, especially, I really, and Elden Ring too, I fundamentally enjoy playing my class. I fundamentally enjoy playing the game, like hitting the abilities, watching the numbers, etc. Now, Warrior in retail WoW, it does definitely have its its high points, of course, but for the most part, like, I mean, I compare like playing a Berserker in Lost Ark or playing a Dark Knight in Final Fantasy to playing a Warrior in retail WoW. It's not as good. It's just simply not. I feel like the retail WoW raids also have a lot of unnecessary friction. Some friction feels good, but too much of it can cause cuts and tears. And I feel like we came out pretty fucking bloody at the end of the raid. We're sitting there, we've got to rebuff constantly, we have to run all the way back to the instance. McConnell had war mode on, so healers couldn't heal him, so he had to go back to Stormwind or something like that to turn off war mode. What the fuck, dude? Like, what is this? And it's just that there's so much friction, so you have to pull the trash mobs, and it's like, the trash mobs are honestly, in my opinion, the least of my concern. Yeah, you pull the trash, maybe you get a BOE, pull another lever on the slot machine, who gives a fuck? But it's like running all the way back to the boss every single time, like, oh my god, then rebuffing, and then waiting for that, and then you have to do a countdown. It's like the downtime between each pull is very, very high. And if you compare that to something, again, like Final Fantasy or Lost Ark, it just simply doesn't exist. And so people say, like, oh, wow, Final Fantasy, it ruined WoW rating for them. To a certain degree, you're right. I mean, you're right. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, we don't have to do it. Why the fuck do we have to do this? This is great. We just go and pull the boss again, right? And it's like, for me, I'm a person that gets frustrated very easily, okay? Maybe nobody knew that before, but I am. And so because I get frustrated so easily, it's like, I'm not heroic Ragnaros where it's a 25-minute enrage. I'm like Cruel where it's a minute and a half. And as soon as somebody dies, I'm already fucking pissed. And so I get frustrated very easily. And so, like, I feel like WoW raids have a lot of very tilting elements to them. Like, you have a raid of like 20 people and like 2 people die and you can't res one of them. And in Final Fantasy, you can res them and you can recover from mistakes like that more often. And it feels more like you're learning and you can actually have like a turnaround. But in WoW, it feels more like a wipe, feels like a slow death. It's like you're just slowly, like, you're 6 out of 30 people alive in a raid, or like 16 out of 35 people alive in a raid, 30 people alive in a raid, and like the boss is at 50%, and it goes on for 3 more minutes, and the boss goes down to 23%, and he casts an ability that people can't meet the DPS check for, and they fucking die. It's just like, oh my god, like, what is going on? Oh, wow. And it just drives me fucking crazy. And it's just, like, I do something like that, and I'm just not having fun. And I don't know really if this is an age thing. I personally don't really think that it is. I think that it's just an opportunity cost type thing. Because back whenever I would do the raids in those other games, etc., I also hated it even then, but I didn't really have anything else that I felt like I could do. And I think now with like my stream and being in the place that it is, I think to myself, well, I could be doing this, which I don't really think is that entertaining or that fun to watch. And I could do that, or I could go and I could play Elden Ring. I could go play Lost Ark, or fuck, man, I could just go do a transmog contest, or watch videos, or do something else that's fun. And I think that word fun is really what it comes down to for me, is that I don't really find WoW raids and progressing in them fun. It's just not fun. That's all there is to it. I just don't enjoy them. I feel like I never really have, but I've always made excuses for it, like, oh, well, it's good for stream content, or, oh, it's good for gear. Like, this is a really good piece of gear, I've got to do it. But nowadays, I just don't really have the same motivation to do that. And I think, again, it comes from a lot of different places. It comes from playing other games. It comes from, in my opinion, the increase of the amount of mechanics and responsibilities an average player has in a raid. So it becomes harder to pug. There become more ways that you can fail and less ways that you can succeed. And just also a diminishing and dying alliance population on retail WoW. And you just put all of these things together and you just end up with not having fun. And it's weird because, like, I want to log on and I want to play WoW, but, like, what do I really want to do on WoW? I just want to farm mounts and farm transmog and maybe do, like, some raids with the boys, some easy raids, and, just goof around and fuck around, right? I don't really want to do a bunch of, like, hard, like, group content. I love the Mage Tower. I love soloing Guardians in Lost Ark. I love Elden Ring because I can fight hard bosses, and or at least they're supposed to be hard. Not whenever I have the weapon that I have, though, which is pretty nice. And so it's not that I don't really like challenges. I think that I do like challenges. It's just that my tolerance for group challenges and the frustrations that come with that have really just gone down over the years. And at this point now, I don't really have fun whenever I feel like my time is getting wasted and I feel like I could be doing something better with it. And I think that's kind of what's happened over the years, and that's probably what the biggest paradigm shift has been, is that I just don't have to do it, and I don't want to. I think that's really all it comes down to. And it's not something that's been fun. And I think, again, also about, like, especially with my stream, whenever I'm sitting there wiping or I'm doing something like that, I always think to myself, like, would I have fun watching this? Would I have fun doing this? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. It's just not fun to watch. It's not fun to do. Sitting and watching people wipe on a WoW raid over and over and over, it just doesn't really excite me that much. And I don't think that it excites a lot of people that much. I feel like that's indicated by a lot of people's sentiment towards it. And I would rather do something that's a little bit more exciting and a little bit more fun. So it's a weird position to be in, because as somebody who loves WoW and, I like playing the game a lot, it's just disappointing to see WoW and Blizzard pour so much resources and so much time into something that I feel like isn't really the end game for a lot of players. And I feel like it's not something that really matters as much as Blizzard and some of the high-end players think it does. I feel like the game would be a lot better if we focused more on content that was fun, it was interesting, and it was just unique, and it didn't have these type of fuck you mechanics that the raids do. And I feel like a lot of times whenever a new patch comes out in WoW, the main thing, like 90% of the patch, like 80% of the patch is the new raid, at least over half. Like, this is the main centerpiece of the content in the game. And we don't really have as many things like the Darkmoon Fair. We don't have things like, I guess, Gold Saucer in Final Fantasy, or, a lot of the islands in Lost Ark, or a lot of other features like in WoW, like the Mage Tower, etc. And the Mage Tower, which was a resounding success in Legion, and now again when they bring it back in Shadowlands, it's also a resounding success again, and despite some balance problems. But overall, this is really the way that I feel, is that I feel like raiding in WoW has just cannibalized so many other elements of the game that it just, like, there's so much development time and so much effort put into making the raids hard, making them well balanced, making them really well tuned, and having all of these intricate abilities that, function very well together, that are able to feed the egos of top 1% players whenever they're able to overcome them. I just don't really feel like this is something that's appealing for an average player anymore. I don't feel like this is something that's fulfilling for an average player anymore. And I don't think the solution to that is to have an easier difficulty. I think the solution to that is to have better content that has more variety and it's more interesting. I think Zereth Mortis, like some of the content in there is kind of cool. Like the prototype thing where you can make the different mounts, etc. Like, that's cool for sure. but there's just really not a lot of depth to something like, you know, Korthia has been out a lot more, so I've had a lot more experience with it. There's not really a lot of depth with something like Korthia. And you just go in there and you do your daily quests, and that's about it. There's not really a whole lot for a casual player that doesn't raid to do. And I think that's one of the big problems that WoW has had with retaining players, is that there's been so much of a focus on raiding. There's been so much of a focus on, you know, like pursuing these in-game repetitive systems, like raiding, Mythic Plus, like Arena, and like 3v3 Arena to be specific, really, and RBGs, is that I feel like this content only appeals to a very small amount of people, and you don't really think about the amount of people that exist that just play the game, that want to have fun content that's good to do, that feels rewarding. Things like the Mage Tower, things like the Dark Moon Fair, things like the Islands in Lost Ark, things that are just fun, not easy, but fun. And I feel like, again, fundamentally, raiding in WoW, watching your raid just slowly bleed out for 3 minutes until it's finally a wipe and you have to spend 5 minutes running back, it's just not fun. And the cinematics suck too. How the fuck is Sylvanas gonna monologue at Arthas? Oh wow, you're such a piece of shit. I can't believe you got controlled by the jailer. Unlike me, who got controlled by the jailer. Get the fuck out of here. Who writes this trash? Oh my god. I can't wait for next week. I'm sure it'll be very fun. Anyway, that's kind of the way that I feel. I kind of wanted to make a video and talk about generally my feelings about WoW and like the PvE content in the game. And I hope you guys can see where I'm coming from. I hope this makes a little bit more sense to people that were a little bit more confused or frustrated with what I've said in the past. And I'd be curious to hear what people's feedback is and what their opinions are, because I feel like there's a large amount of people that feel the same way that I do. And I'd be curious to see if that's really true. So leave me a comment, leave me a like, leave me whatever. And that's pretty much all I've got. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Until the next time. Peace.